what are the, as you say, ingredients for successful creation?
Ingredients for successful creation. Going back to it, I think it is authenticity. I think it is iteration and practice. I think it is getting through, like having whatever you need to work through that fear, whether that's time, encouragement, or motivation. But in the first steps of any creative process is and a very internal one.
Hey, sweet souls, and welcome to ChangeLiscious, the podcast that turns life's hot mess into your next big yes. I'm your host, Hedi, work-life innovation coach, design thinker, storyteller, and chaos to success connoisseur. Around here, we don't just talk about change, we live it, we breathe it, we dance with it. So buckle up, grab your favorite drink, and let's dive into the wild, brave, and beautiful journeys of people who dared to remix their lives and came out tasting success. This is ChangeLiscious. Let's make change delicious. Thank you so much for being here. I'm very, very honored. I've known you for many years from afar, and sometimes we've connected, and I'm very grateful that we have this connection, and we've had these connections also through tough times, personal transformations and the transformation at large in this world. Who are you? And what do you feel worthy about change?
Okay. I love this big question to start. I mean, I guess, do you want the rehearsed answer or the thoughtful answer? Because rehearsed answer,
None of it. The intuitive Brian answer.
which is this is the intuitive one, because it is exactly that. I struggle with this question, like, who am I, right? Every day you meet somebody, like the same people, your friends or whatever, and they ask, how are you? I get stuck. I don't know how to answer, how are you? I really stop and consider, like, yeah, how am I right now? Yeah, I think that happened actually, um, right in the beginning of this call. We just started and you said, how are you? And I really froze. I'm like, right. How am I in this moment? What's happening in my world right now, right at this exact second?
Who are you in this right moment?
And so the same thing happens with who am I? I'm like, oh wow, okay, that is a big question. Not because I haven't thought about it. I've thought about it too much, probably. My hesitation is my response to who I am. And I think to frame it in a more clear and direct way, it is, uh, I'm a thinker. I like to think. I know it sounds pretentious to say that, because, like, don't we all think? But some people treat it with a little bit more care and try to make a profession out of it. So I think a lot. I think about myself, identity. I think about relationships. I think about business and startup. I think about change and creativity. So, and the whole process of all of this, life and death, right? So I just want to understand what this means for myself and for others as we change, because, going from young to old, there's a lot. What we think of these things is also changing. And so again, like, who am I? How are you? It's the same thing. Like, what do these words mean now, in 10 years, and next week even?
What do you make a living off of right now? Being a thinker, being Brian?
Living. So I guess, yeah, being Brian, I think that's the ultimate. Being who I am is the ultimate. And then, what I do for work is just some things for on the side, I guess. Is I try to make it as much on the side as I can, or at least as much integrated as I can. But to answer you directly, yeah, I call myself a thinking partner for thoughtful leaders or thoughtful founders. And so I work with founders and small business owners as a consultant or coach, whatever you want to call it, to guide them through the process of, I was going to say change, but also growth. Really, it's a lot more times growth than change. You can use the two interchangeably, but they they come to you when they're stuck with, a point in the business, maybe 5 years in, 7 years in, and they've been doing it for some time, and they realize they want to reach the next level, whether that's raising new funds, of rebranding their business, leaving a business partner, changing the business model, going into a new market, or even fundamental, like changing themselves and changing either themselves as a leader and a communicator, or changing the whole thing and really pivoting hard in their life and then thinking about the business. So there's a lot of different instances where somebody might work with somebody like me. Long answer, but short answer, consultant.
Thoughtful Brian consultant.
Yeah, yeah, that's it.
So I have a couple of questions. So first and foremost, I think this is very relevant to the community. Is it true that the Brian who you are, just made a business out of make money out of who you are? Is that correct? Or how would you frame it? Because a lot of people are lost. They think, let me rephrase it. I'll give a little bit of background there. They're lost because they've taken a path that maybe it wasn't theirs, that was maybe,
Right.
societal parental programming, whatever. And I find it very inspiring, or people are always very often very curious, like, how do you just do that? Just being you. Is
Yeah.
that true first and foremost? And how did you do it?
I think that's very, I hesitated. I understood the question, but I hesitated because I think it could lead the person down the wrong path if you just say, oh, just be yourself. I think that's because there is a bit of a process to it. I think there's a bit of, there are ingredients needed
Walk
to
us
make it.
through the ingredients.
Well, why do you want to change? Is there any change? Is there any reason to be more authentic? Do you even feel there? Some people don't even feel the sensation that they need to be more authentic. They think they are authentic already, or they think they are how they're supposed to be. And isn't that great? You are how you're supposed to be. That sounds good. You are what you're supposed to be. But supposed to, once you break it down, you think like, oh, supposed to, as according to who? To what? As you alluded to earlier, what expectations? Whose expectations? So I think so. There has to be like an impetus, something to drive you to want to go deeper, and then there has to be an awareness of how authentic you are. And even after it's my 12th year of the business, and however many years of pre-work and pre-discovery before that, decades probably, I still know I'm not fully authentic. I know that. I know I'm still playing game, and I know there are points where I can be even more vulnerable and more authentic, and I'm working myself towards there when I want and not all at once. So yeah, I hesitate with this question again because I think, yeah, you can read the books, you can have the coaches, you can have the mindset. Just sometimes they will accelerate, but everyone takes their own time to find out if they're ready to be just yourself.
Yeah, I know. I get this question a lot and I hesitate there as well. But was there a time when you particularly leveled up and found your business today, having this thought, I want to be more of
So
myself? What did you do before versus now differently?
before I worked as an English teacher in China for a period of time. I worked also in I'm American. I worked in America in a big hotel chain in the headquarters of doing B2B marketing, and I studied business. And then I worked in a small training company, and there we needed to think about the questions of leadership. Who are you? What are your dreams? What's your purpose on this earth? What do you want your legacy to be? Very, very big questions. What are your values? Very fundamental questions. Not just big, but fundamental. And I was 27 at that time and curious. So I would absorb all these questions, and my job as a marketing it was a small team, but as the marketing guy on this team, I needed to take those questions. What did that entail? What did it mean? Why do people struggle with this? What are the possibilities of that? And then translate that into marketing to make it interesting for other people to want to consume. And so in doing that for several years in a small business over and over and over and over again, it became very much a part of my mind. Like, these are the questions I think about. And in those 2.5 years, eventually got so much into the core of my mind that I realized I wanted to be even more me. And of course, being surrounded by other inspirational people, coaches and leaders who were also doing that helped. And and so we would talk about this all the time and try to help each other understand what our goals and dreams were and where we were limiting ourselves and where what special strengths we might have. It was really great to have that mirror and feedback, especially at 27 to 29. And so at 29, I realized like I wanted to do something different and take the skills that I had, being a trainer, teaching English, doing marketing, in a small business context and a big business context. And I think those are the three main things I had done. And I wondered, like, what if I were to do that as a business? What if I were to do the things I love? And I thought about this, right? What is it? What does it mean to be Brian? Oh, this is a good way to answer your earlier question. This is one of the rehearsed answers I have is the things I love to do most are to understand, create, and communicate. This is what it means to be Brian, right? Everything I do is just trying to understand the world, understand questions, understand people, understand dynamics, whatever it is, understand problems, break that down into its all component parts, see the connections, creating. I love visual arts, video, film, communication, storytelling, speech making. All of this is communication. Even just dialogue is a form of creation. And so, yeah, that to me is kind of an art form too. So create, communicate, and understand. So communicate is the one I'm missing now. So the last thing is like sharing that. So those are the three things that make Brian Brian. If I'm missing any one of them, I feel incomplete. So
Is this also how you build your Brian business? Like understanding, okay, that's me. I want to change something. Create it in actually taking the action steps and then communicating. So, hey, this is my business. Is that like really?
I didn't frame it as clearly as it is now because, again, at 29, in the first iteration of this, I still was very foggy on who I wanted to be. So I want to make a creativity consultancy. Creativity because I like thinking differently. I think differently, I realize, than most people. And consultancy is because I wanted to help people and help businesses. And so I wanted to frame it in that way.
Yeah.
I had no idea what creativity consultancy meant. Over time, in saying this to people, I started to realize what they thought it meant. And a lot of times it would mean different things to different people. And so I set it up in this inverted way to allow people to fill their own ideas into it. And then I would play with their ideas as a way of
How did you play? How did you play with their ideas?
I would just say a creative consultancy. It's like, oh, so you work with brands? I was like, yeah, sometimes. And then so I would talk about that, or just like creative consultancy, or they would be really confused, like, so you work with businesses to grow. It's like, yeah, yeah. And then we talk about that, right? So
And you
being,
talked about that, or you really had like you really took action and were the consultant then, like you filled this gap that was missing.
I think I'm talking about the first time I interact with somebody when they're trying to understand who I am. And I say, at that time, I have a creativity consultancy, and they didn't know what that meant. So the goal was to be, I'm borrowing a term from a mentor, artfully vague. So you're vague, but on purpose. You're not doing it to annoy people, but you're doing it to invite conversation and engagement. I hate to say it, we want short, concise answers, and so we end up being boring as a side effect. And I think it's a shame because I think everyone's job is interesting to a way. But if you say, yeah, I don't know, mechanical engineer, I really don't want to talk about that, right? But if you say like, I help people move faster, it's like, oh, that's really interesting. Like, what does that mean? It's like, yeah, I build cars. I built spaceships. I built whatever, right? It could, like, the mind goes in all these different directions. Yeah, so I like that. I like creating that space. So once I realized who I was, then, well, at least these three attributes of creating, communicating, understanding, then I wanted to do that full time. And so I left that company, the previous company, and I didn't think I had a name yet early on, or I went through many different names until I landed on Let's Make Great. That's the brand I've been holding, the flag that I've been holding since 2013,
Wow.
beginning of 2013. Yeah.
Wow. 12 years. Speaking of especially the creation part, and maybe also communication, but especially the creation part. Because you said something very interesting before I hit record, that we're often very caught up in the brain, like in the mind. It's all about the mindset, and then it's all about this, and now it's all about that. And you said, yeah, we're all different, but especially as a creator, what does creation, or may I say the word successful, whatever, however you define success for yourself, but really moving towards a result that you want to have or feel accountable or can iterate on even, what are the, as you say, ingredients for successful creation?
Ingredients for successful creation. going back to it, I think it is authenticity. I think it is iteration and practice. I think it is getting through, like having whatever you need to work through that fear, whether that's time, encouragement, or motivation. But in the first steps of any creative process is and a very internal one. Uh, everyone,
Give us
well,
more.
we may have the idea, we may have some inspiration. Someone may say something, you may see something on the street, you see some video on YouTube or whatever on Instagram, and you're like, oh, that's cool. Why don't they do it like this?
Mm.
It's just, and it's like, oh, what if I or what if I did it like that? And taking something we see, breaking that apart and taking a small piece of it and trying to either add something or internalize it into our own business, our own brand, our own self. So that is the first initial step. And then once we have that, that's like most of us, once we see that, we stop there. And
We stop actually. Can I
yeah,
jump
yeah,
before?
please. Yeah.
So many us already stopped before. Question: is it about allowance or to have these thoughts, that these glimpses are coming through and that we take them seriously? Because oftentimes people are, yeah, I'm under the shower and I had this idea, but it doesn't matter.
Mhm.
How would you describe this space? Because it can already kill the first step of creation. What is it? Is it allowance, or how would you frame this for also
Yeah.
people who are not really used to creation?
Right. I think music is interesting because it plays with your expectations and plays with this feeling of serendipity. It almost feels like, right? And if you just hearing that, you can kind of imagine what might come next. And being in the frame of mind where we can see the connections, i.e., in music or in art, with movies, or with a great conversation, or with a stand-up set and in comedy, they play with expectations. And once we play with our expectations, our mind starts to open and we start to see there are many different ways for ideas to come together. Um, and so, as I just listed out those things, those media, these pieces of art, or these forms of art, whatever it may be, it could be sports. All of that is allowing your mind to open up to serendipity, to inspiration. And I think that is a mode of being that most non-creatives don't realize they can tap into. So that is really important to be able to tap into that mindset. And then you add on top of it positivity, just optimism, and realizing like this idea could turn into something else, or these ideas, other people have ideas and they do turn them into art, into businesses, into products, whatever, maybe brands, whatever, the little TikTok videos. So
And then,
positivity and
yeah,
serendipity. Yeah,
yeah.
positivity and serendipity, and getting yourself into the mode of seeing serendipity. So I think those two are the earlier stage. I think that's what you're talking about.
And you said something about, then you said iteration and fear, cutting through the fear. Is that simultaneously? How would you describe it as a process?
Yeah, so I like that you took it a step before that. And now, once you have the idea, what are you supposed to do with it? I think most people cut themselves off, and that's where positivity comes into play, but also working through the fear. I think the more times you work through fear, the various fears of our life, and I have a lot of them, but once you work through all those fears, then the easier it becomes to move towards creation. And that could be just talking to somebody about sharing an idea, drawing it out, writing it down, putting it online, actually going to the garage or basement and start working on something. Doesn't have to be pretty. And I think that's the thing. I think we're so used to seeing commercial, mass produced products that have millions of dollars and some of the greatest minds in the world working on them. And so we use that as our standard of what's normal. But if you've ever been in an artist studio or in a workshop of any kind, a carpenter's workshop, a garage, it's not pretty, it's dirty. Even a writer's studio is probably oftentimes dirty with notes, or their notebook itself is probably dirty with all these different ideas. Yeah, I like to have studied that and seen and surround myself with these people, because then I realize this is the process. It's not clean. Um, and it takes work. It takes a lot of work, and no one is sure about the ideas, but they're just trying to work through their fear piece by piece.
That it's not about tools. You're the tool.
So yeah,
You're the tool. And what next? So iteration, can you tell us a bit more about that? Because that's a big word.
iteration just means the repeated cycles or the repeated attempts to develop the idea. And when I look through my work, just to put it simply, I've written a book, I've created a card game, I've produced multiple short films, I give speeches all the time, and I write tons of articles. I have a lot of different types of work. I don't say this to brag, but I say this because it's given me, what is it, almost like an archive to look through and analyze my process. And I realize I'm still trying to answer the same things, about the big ideas, these big ideas about creativity or about love or about connection. And I just try to cut it in different ways and seeing how they stick together. And that's my analysis process. And so when I say iteration, go back to your question. When I say iteration, you can almost see like the card game was one iteration of this central idea that I have. The book was another iteration of this central idea that I have. The business is another iteration of this central idea that I have. So there are these kind of macro iterations, and there's also the micro iterations. I think we're very used to talking about the micro iterations of like prototype version 1 versus prototype version 100. There's going to be a lot of growth there. But looking at on a grander scale, on a very personal scale, you probably will see that you're chasing the same questions and trying to answer them over and over and over again. If those questions have any meaning to you, and if you have any awareness, if you look for it, you will probably see that you're trying to answer the same questions over and over again, even in the same job, you know, so, or in the same career, different jobs in the same career. You might see like, oh, I've always been chasing whatever, gender equality or climate change, fighting climate change, et cetera, et cetera. It's always been a central thread. So it's fun to look at that, the macro iterations too.
Very nice. Very good. Very good to think about. Yeah. I'm back to purpose. I'm back to purpose. Purpose and values. Yeah. Awesome. Okay. 2 questions. One is maybe it also is related. Don't know. You said that your creative outputs they're always different because you're cutting them into pieces. And what is the underlying motive? Yes, you said you're answering a different question. You're answering the same question in different ways. And you said something about boring, and you said something about growth, and you said something about making change easier or growth easier. I just want to make sure that I got it or that I'm putting the dots together. Is this a trait of a create in many different ways, limitless, using different types of expression in order to not only to answer the question, but to grow while answering the question and expand and being the limitless being that we are? Close question mark.
So I will actually say no. I don't think
Cool.
I think there are some creators that really focus on writing and they do it so well and they're still answering the same questions. They're doing it differently and
Yeah.
they probably are continuing to challenge themselves within the same single craft. And so that's also possible. There are other types of creatives that are multidisciplinary or multi-talented, whatever you want to call that, or just people who are just curious and want to work in different mediums, or they haven't found the medium that works for them.
Yeah.
So, or various, I think there's this connection that we have with the medium. Does this make sense for me? Like so back in middle school, this is the beginning of the internet. And so I taught myself how to code, right? HTML websites and things like that. This was fun, but I couldn't do the coding now. Like it doesn't speak to me. Like I know I could have, when you're young and your brain is so malleable, right? I was like, that was so cool just to look at code and to imagine it and to write it all out, right? We did that and it was so fun with my friends. And it was great. There was a logic, but it was really artful. And then you could see the whole process of creation too, as a kid. And then now if you ask me to code something, I'd be like, oh God, I'm still using what I learned when I was 12, 13. And so, code has evolved too, but it doesn't speak to me anymore. I don't like it. It's not intuitive. I much prefer visual arts, or I much prefer Actually, what I prefer most is and somewhere between storyboarding and PowerPoint, Keynote, and movies. In this space, this is where I love like sequencing and organizing on the screen how things are gonna move and what they should be. This is where my mind works. This is what I love.
Interesting. This is how your mind works, and this is how you that is entangled with.
That kind
Yeah.
of works.
Interesting.
Was it best with my mind for now? So but there's certain people, but maybe I'm lying. I also want to give myself like options and opportunity to think like, well, maybe creating clay pots or something is the medium I should work in. Or I've always wondered, why do certain artists choose certain media?
Very interesting question. Yeah, very interesting. I had a similar thought when it's not knitting, but when you do the stitching,
Crocheting?
I love it. I love it. And I think this is my need to bring pieces together.
This is perfect, right? There's something about it. There's something that speaks to us, whether it's like a pace or a pattern or just that repetition, whatever it is, or play, just creating these different things. So to go back to your initial question, is like, yeah, I think there's some artists that, choose a specific medium and one that speaks to them most. I think no artist is ever limited to a single media. They will probably always have multiple ones, like, loving to write, but also loving to cook. Very different modes of expression, but they are still creative acts. Yeah. And I like that because it forces people outside of the creative industry to look at their life through a creative lens as looking at their professions as a type of media, and gives everyone a chance to be creative in a way.
What do you think about this claim that everybody is creative, that everybody is a design thinker, that everybody is a creator?
Well, I never heard of everyone is a design thinker, but that's something else. Yeah, I think everyone is creative. I think everyone, I'll push it even further. One thing I believe is that everyone can be an entrepreneur. Most people choose not to be because of a circumstance, but I think we all are creative, maybe in our own micro way. And if you're not, you're probably stuck under layers of fear and expectation, so much so that you're not even aware of it. And that's fine. But I think if you've ever written a text message to a friend or to a colleague, you're creative because you had to figure out how to piece those words together somehow. And it could be something as simple as that. If you've ever made, a sandwich for yourself, there are a million ways to make a sandwich. You can toast it, you can cut the crust off. Do you cut it diagonal? Do you cut it squares? Do um, use the panini machine, the grill, cheese, no cheese? Anyway, these are all just media. Anything can be creative if you approach it that way, if you look at it that way. But there's also a need for routine and safety and comfort and stability and having a foundation. And I think that's why I understand, like when you you have to feel a certain sense of safety to want to do this. And maybe we should add that back to that ingredient list in the beginning. If you don't feel safe, you're not going to look for the serendipitous.
Right.
So
Absolutely. Absolutely. Spread your wings when you have your roots.
yeah.
One last question before we wrap it up. So you talked about your 1-year-old nephew. Is it a niece or a nephew?
He's a nephew, yeah.
Nephew. Growing up in this world, he grows up right now. What is the one thing about, becoming this free, authentic creator that you would want him to understand so he can become the creator, this authentic creator? What is this advice or whatever it is that you want to give him, Brian?
I right now the thing that comes to mind is I don't want to interfere. I trust that he will be able to do it. I have lots of tactics and answers and advice. I do it for professionally, so I can do that. But that may be the worst thing.
Why?
He has his own path. I have no idea what his path is going to be. And I trust that he'll be able to figure it out. And if he's curious, he may ask people like me, or he will simply ask his uncle. But I also believe that even now, at 1 year old, he is not fully capable, but he's very full of potential to be capable to answer those things in his own way, and maybe in ways that I don't understand. So that's scary for me, but I trust that to be true. I mean, I think we already see it with this next generation, that they see the world so differently that I resist offering any advice, which is frustrating for them, I'm sure. But hopefully they appreciate that space to want to do something, to step into that space of exploring, and to see how they will take their dreams or take their visions and what they can do with it. Because I don't know. Shoot, if we knew, we would have done something. We would have done it differently. But we tried,
Mm.
and that's all I think they can do, is just to be themselves and to try. You don't have to listen to anybody else.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Wonderful insights.
Yeah, it's really fun to talk about this because, of course, even for us working in it every day, to describe it and to think about it in the macro picture, in the abstract, is maybe, I don't know, I lose it. We all get caught up with our own work and our own sense of we think we are.
That's a wrap on another ChangeLiscious episode where transformation never tasted so good. If your soul's feeling fed, don't forget to follow, leave a love note, aka review, and share the goodness with somebody really ready to flip the script. For more juicy insights and sweet inspiration, follow me, Hedi Schaefer, and let's keep stirring up change that sticks. Until next time, stay real, stay bold, and keep it ChangeLiscious.